So I want to call the meeting to order. Chair Rakowski is on a college trip with her daughter, so she is not here today. I'm Tom Borchard. I'm the vice chair, so I will be chairing today's meeting. If I forget to do something, please remind me. So I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So George and then Mark seconded. We need to add an executive session before the current executive session. That will be for confidential attorney-client communication under 1 VSA 313A1F. Are there any other changes that need to be, that anyone wants to make, needs to add to that? So all in favor of adopting the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, so, sorry, abstentions? Thanks, John. So we'll adopt the vote passes. We have adopted the agenda, and we are going to move on to board and committee reports. First from the superintendent.
My report contained 3 items. One was a pretty comprehensive report put together by Lynn Rappaport, who's here. I would direct your questions that you have about that to Lynn directly. She's come tonight. We decided to put that in a written report rather than have her do a presentation this year, though, just sort of in the interest of time. The other 2 items in my report was to acknowledge Grady DeVoyd's presidential scholars nomination.
Speak up, Sheila.
Yep, and the third was in and around the middle level task force planning. We have our first meeting coming up at the end of next week.
We can't hear her at all. No, I think she's saying.
So, any questions about any of that?
No, but I do have.
Please, John.
I just want to make a comment about, so how have things, when will things progress? I'm sorry if it was written beyond the 2 chairs of the middle level task force? When are the next steps to filling out a full committee?
So this is a task force.
A task force, thank you.
Yes, which
Not a
is not the
committee.
same thing as a committee.
Thank
So
you.
they're really driving the work, and they will determine throughout the process the need to expand, include others in different parts. So there will be times when I'm sure this task force will want to include student voice on the committee. There will be times when they'll want to interface probably through the CEC with the broader community, but they really need to get their bearings first and then develop the plan going forward. So in the beginning, they have not met yet, right? They don't even all work in the same building. So they need that opportunity to come together and get their bearings and understand sort of the parameters of this problem that they're willing to lead for the district. So that's the benefit of allowing them to begin the process. So that's what we're doing. And they're going to keep meeting throughout the spring. So, we need to let that unfold a bit before I could fill in the gaps of what you're really asking. But throughout the process, and that's what was written on the time frame. If you look at that table, community engagement is throughout the process. So that was kind of a continuum along the bottom. So it's not a specific step in the process, but rather infiltrated. So that could come in the form, if you think back to the communication plan that I shared last year, there's all different kinds of community engagement, right? They may decide to do surveys at different times. They may have face-to-face meetings. They may have an informational night. They may have a particular problem where they want to have study circles and people come out and really brainstorm ideas. So I don't know what those are yet because they haven't met and they haven't developed those needs.
Do you think that some of that community engagement work might come this academic year? Or do you think it's more likely to be, without, I mean,
Yeah, I don't
understanding
know.
the process?
I think it's probably going to take more shape next year, but that's not to say they wouldn't be soliciting some
Feedback.
level of input now. But, you know, they have a big meeting coming up at the end of January, next week. And then they'll be meeting more or less monthly thereafter. And part of that will be gearing up for the professional development that they'll be able to take part in June. So it's only a handful of meetings. It may sound like a long time, but it's really not that many meetings when you're talking an hour or two at a time. So I would imagine that it really heats up more so in the fall of next year in terms of that expanded engagement. But
I have a question. When will student voice be introduced to this team? I know there's been talk about students being on like leadership teams that are currently teachers, but it's never been a set date. Will it be next year, the end of this year? I just would like to know.
I think that's the same question that Tom just asked and I answered, which was.
He asked about community engagement. And
I guess I think of students as part of that community engagement. So right now, this task force needs to get together and get their bearings and decide where those points of interface will be and for what purpose. So,
because the students are just a little more of direct stakeholders within the school.
absolutely, I don't disagree.
So I think maybe getting them involved the sooner the better.
I don't disagree.
Do other folks have questions either about the middle school task force or for Lynn about the, her report, the wellness report?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. It was an awesome report.
Yes.
Can I ask how the process of moving the restorative practices down to K through 6 has been going? Like what's been difficult, what's been easier?
I think the biggest thing that we've realized when we, well, at least one of the things that I realized when we brought a coach in to work with the K through 6, there was a lot of similarities that she brought up with responsive classroom. So it was, I think, for me, just an interesting aha moment of, oh, these are very similar. We really need to take some time to see how they interconnect and what maybe the differences are. So it's slow. I think we're looking a little bit more into some classroom coaching now and seeing how that goes. Yeah. I mean, we're also kind of waiting to see what other changes might come and how that affects learning also.
Will there be a some kind of moment at the end of this year to talk about how it's worked or not worked?
I think so. I mean, I think depending on, what kind of educational moments we have here, I mean, we're happy to come and, talk some more about our social emotional screening tools and all that falls under that as well, too. Keep it posted.
John, please.
Okay, just on the wellness. So, I just invite the public or anybody who's listening on RETN to go and check out and really read the district's wellness policy, because we spent many months writing that policy together, and Lynn clearly was the leader of that. And it's a model that the VSBA is now taking on and using. Our model is the model that is being used throughout the state. And it covers an enormous amount of ground, from just like health education and physical activity, all the way up to employee wellness and family engagement and nutrition programs. It's a huge and complicated policy, and so thank you for this written report on that.
I would also add too that Lynn is the glue for holding all of these initiatives together in our district, and for a position that's funded through grants, that's a great value to this district. And I also can't imagine what our own staff wellness program would be like without her, and that is a return on your investment in the savings to lost time due to sickness and other things. So, she's an exceptional employee, and we're very lucky to have her. And I'll just take this moment to
everybody for thinking it's so fun.
So, Elizabeth, so unless, does someone else, nope, okay, so I want to move on to the Director of Finance and Operations report. Oh, I'm really sorry, that was me. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So I have a lot of different things that are in my report for this month, so I just want to kind of touch upon each one of them. Some of them, the notes have to do with action approval items that are later, but just kind of so we touch base with them. The first one is I wanted to celebrate a donation that we received at the district from Energy North Incorporated, which is the Middlebury Mobile Station, for $500 that was given to the Ferrisburg Central School. This was given to help pay for admission fees and programs for students. Thank you for your generosity, and that's as an action item later to approve by the board. We have the financial reports for the current month in this round. There's nothing super surprising in there. The only one note I had in regards to those is that you as the board will notice, like last year, this is not new, if we have any invoices that come after our audit is finalized that belonged in the prior year, I budget reserve those against lines in the current year so that the money cannot be spent twice. So that's something that's new probably since I arrived in the district, basically just trying to ensure that if those invoices come in late, that it's not like they got to spend them last year and this year. They only get to spend it once. And it promotes people to really try hard to make sure we got all of the invoices that belong in the year that they're supposed to be in. And usually those are typically things that are received even after the auditors arrived. So it's not like they came in July or August, they came in October or something. So you'll see that I did that in this round of reports and made sure that those were all accounted for. On our work plan this month, we have the review of the contract for audit services. So this isn't the audit itself, but how we contract for that service. We went out to bid for this service in fiscal year 19. We awarded a 3-year contract to R.H.R. Smith in that bid process. Attached to your packet, there was the acceptance letter for that bid, the cost sheet that was provided for the bid, and then the engagement letter, which serves as the contract between us and the auditing firm. This will cover our bid through the end of the year ending June 30th of 2021. So that's the audit for 2021, which doesn't end until fiscal year 22. We are likely to do another bid in the spring of 2022 because it's best practice to do so, but I just want to point out that it's not actually a legal requirement. We are satisfied with the company's excellent service to our district, so we're enjoying our contract with them. I do have a final draft of the audit that is handed out to you tonight. I want to forewarn that as I was working through my points for review that I'm going to share with you, at some point, I don't know if we're going to do that now right after this or if we're going to wait till later in the meeting, but I think it's probably right along with my report. Basically, I found a formula error in one of the reports, and so that formula error caused a calculation error which wraps to other pages in the document. And so when I noticed it yesterday, I quickly corresponded with the auditing firm, and they were able to get us a new corrected draft. It's not changing the overall dollar amounts of your figures, it's just that the totals were not matching up. So when I was trying to do my explanations, it didn't make sense because I couldn't make them add up. So they fixed that. Unfortunately, the one that's currently attached to your agenda is not the correct version. So as soon as we're back at the office tomorrow, I'll be giving Glory an electronic copy of this one you have on paper, and we will attach it to this and everywhere else that it needs to be.
Okay.
So I'll walk through that when we go through my notes on the actual audit. Let's see, another action item we have tonight, if you recall, at the end of fiscal year 19, we had a deficit in the child nutrition program of $49,064.07. At the time, we weren't 100% sure what the dollar value was, so the board approved an up to amount to fund with the general fund at the close of that year. We were not able to actually fund that approved transfer because we did not have enough in our general fund at the end of the year to do so. So tonight, the action item is to, again, approve that deficit, but to fund it in the current fiscal year. And in my report, I noted that in the event that that is approved, I will do a budget reserve to the current year expense lines so that there, again, money can't be spent in the general fund that goes above and beyond that. It's basically money that can't be spent this year to cover that. And last but not least, we have the final expenditure budget for FY '21 with changes since the last round. And we will also discuss that. And that's all I have on my regular report. I don't know if you want to stop and does anyone have any questions about any of those particular items before we move on to the audit review?
In regards to the deficit for the nutrition program, has there been any has anyone looked into any grants that could perhaps help cover that, maybe for students whose family hasn't paid off bills due to family circumstances or anything like that that could help reduce the deficit?
Yes, I wouldn't say they're grants at this time. There has been a number of people that have contacted the district, just individuals looking to outreach and possibly, fundraise or have some kind of fund where they can actually contribute to something like that. So they've been in contact with the coordinator of the child nutrition program, which we partner with Mount Abraham. Kathy Alexander oversees that program for us and for them. So she's been talking with some of those people to see if there's a way that we can, maybe for people who can't pay their bill but don't qualify for free and reduced and such things like that. So there is some of that going on. Another conversation that has recently come up is trying to expand on our catering. So services for food that we can provide in the course of our day that we're already working on, but outside the school district. So for instance, a preschool that's in the area or something like that. So it's something that we're talking about and just trying to see if there's any interest in that. The more revenue we can turn around, the better. And then also working with our expenditures to try to see if there are ways we can curb costs and be more efficient in the meals that we're providing. So there's a lot of different ideas out there. There is deficits, and I think that in the past that has been larger in this district. It sounds funny to say, but the deficits are getting lower every year as we close our audit. So they are diminishing. It's unfortunate that there is still one there, but it's the dollar amounts are getting smaller each year. So you can tell that there's work being done trying to hone that. And this is also, this year is year 3 of your consolidated cooperative agreement with that food service program. And it's my understanding that it took 3 years in the other district before they got to the point where they were not having a deficit. So just to kind of show that. Yes.
So the $49,000 transfer, the reason the board authorized a transfer was at the time we thought we had a surplus coming.
Yes.
Okay. And now that surplus is
Not there.
Okay.
Yep. So.
And you're
when
going
we
to
go
tell
through
us
the
where that
audit,
is
you
in
can-
here.
yeah.
Right, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I have a
Sure.
quick question. So looking at the other funds financial report,
Yes.
it looks like we still have money in the Act 46 transition grant?
We do. We do.
Not a ton, but.
Not a ton. So what we try to do, so my understanding of that particular grant is that it was designed for certain kinds of expenses. and to do with consolidation, and it can be anything new that you're doing to promote that consolidation also, or to kind of, get the district to come together, whether it's a new website or things like that. But there are specific reasons why the grant was set up. So
Right.
if you didn't spend it in the first year you consolidated, which many districts don't, you can use it on those same types of things. So like when we change over to our new accounting system, because that's a new kind of
That's what I thought
way of
we had
tracking, you can
actually
use it for things
said
like
that
that.
we were gonna use it
But you
for.
just have to make sure that when you're spending it, that you're staying true to the original intent of the grant.
Right.
But it does carry forward, we can still use the money.
Okay. The other question that I had was, I was a little bit confused about the capital improvement fund for VUES.
Mhm.
Does that have 58,000 or does it have $29? That's on page 8.
It's 58, 28, of which, of the audit? No.
Of the
Oh, that-
board other funds
Oh, yeah, yeah.
financial report.
Okay, gotcha.
I hadn't realized there was a fund at VUES.
Yes, there is.
So again, it was page 8 of the electronic version.
Yeah, we did have, I don't know if it's the same page on mine.
It's line 304, if that
Mine's
helps.
right
$29, $29.86.
there. Unclip mine to be able to see it. I don't want to speak without looking at it. 304. Yes, yep. So, you've actually got both. You have $58,085.24, plus you have $29.86. So what you're seeing there is, that first line is the fund balance. That's what carried in from
Yeah.
last fiscal year. And then any activity is in the lines below that, and that activity is the $29.86 was added to it for current interest income. So as you close this fiscal year, those two numbers will add
Got it.
together and
Got
be
it.
in your fund balance.
Okay.
As long as you don't spend any of the money.
Right.
If you spent money, you'd see a third line there showing the money that was spent in the current year.
Yeah.
So yes, you do have, so if you remember when I first got here, there was a number of construction and capital improvement funds. A couple
Yeah.
of them were in the negative and a couple of them were in the positive, and so
And you
we
consolidate.
funded the deficits, we consolidated them, and these are the ones that are remaining that actually all have funds in them. There are no ones sitting anymore with any deficit fund balances.
Cool. That's great. That's more than I thought we had 0, so
Right.
that's better than 0.
Absolutely.
Any other questions about, so why don't we move on to the audit?
Sure. Okay, so I have my talking points for the audit review, and I will give these to Glory electronically after so that she can attach them to the meeting minutes, so that anyone can read them or see them later. And as I noted, there was a formula error, so the electronic copy you see online is currently not the correct final drafts. You have it in your hands, and it will be on there tomorrow. Basically, we continue to clean up the records and improve on the processes in the business office. This is apparent in our audits as we complete them each year. There's always new things that we're working on. The audit itself went very smoothly. The preliminary audit work happens in June. The auditors come in-house, do some preliminary work and try to get us rolling, give us some pointers on how to close out the year, and then they come back sometime either in late August or early September. This year it was in September, so it was a little later than normal. And that, they were there for almost a week when they came to visit us that time. And the items that I'm going to talk about are just regarding particular items in this audit that might be of interest to folks, and a note about the management letter that we have this year. I also want to make it known that the auditing firm is sending at least one member to our meeting on, is it February 10th? Is that the next meeting? Yeah. So they're going to be coming to that meeting, so if there's more questions, I think,
That's a good time
that's a good time to bring those out. So the first item I have regarding the audit is on, if you want to follow along, you can, is on page 17. It's Statement E. So just bringing to attention, there was a lot of, and I tend to pick the things that I see questions coming through from last year's audit and try to talk about them in the current year as we close a year. The performance contract fund was something that people were looking at and questioning. You can tell at the end of FY18, it showed a deficit balance. Do you see the column that says performance contract? This was not actually a deficit, but we had to record it on the books this way. This was when we first entered into our performance contract. We wanted to start work in April vacation before the bonds actually come out. So bonds don't get dispersed to you until August. So we had to borrow money before the bond was actually delivered to us and start that project and pay for those bills. So you basically start out that, at the end of that fiscal year with a deficit because you've borrowed money to pay bills and you haven't gotten your bond proceeds yet. So that's what that was. As you can see, as we close FY19, the project's over, it's done. And now there's a positive fund balance. That positive fund balance, it says $12,919. That is interest that was earned on the bond. So the U.S. Bank and Municipal Bond Bank put our bond in a fund, and until we've spent it, we request it, they pay it to us, and during that time while it sits there, it earns interest. So that interest is being used this year to pay our first payment, towards our first payment on that bond. So it's going to help us in the current fiscal year to pay down the interest on the bond.
All right.
So also on this statement, my other note is general operating. We started the end of fiscal year 18 with a unrestricted fund balance left of $480,192. If you also recall, at the end of that fiscal year, we designated that fund balance to be used towards the fiscal year 20 budget, $430,192, and the other $50,000 for a fund transfer into our capital reserves funds. This was the balance that we had after we used the remaining fund balance from that year to fund the prior year fund deficits from FY17. That was per our resolution that was voted on in May of 18. And we also, in that year before, transferred $124,650 to our capital reserves. So where are we now? Our fund balance at the close of FY19 is still positive at $461,211. However, notice that that is lower than the $430,192 plus the 50 that we had, right? So that's where this comes in when you were talking about the food service having a deficit and not being able to fund that. That's basically because our FY19 actually ended lower than what we had already restricted and committed from FY18. So we're actually short overall by $18,981 in our general fund, which is why we could not fund that fund transfer. And this is how come you also see that $18,981 going against our current budget, because we have to raise that money in the FY21 budget in order to pay that. And I also want to kind of just point out that we have a fund balance analysis sheet that goes into the annual reports every year. I've made that a little more expanded this year than it was last year. It's pretty explaining of how we progressed through the fund balance. So I just want to bring everybody's attention when that book comes out to take a look at that, and hopefully that spells out kind of where we were, where we came, and now where we are. I think that was a little more informative this year than what was in last year's book. And then, so the next page I want to bring up is page 69, Schedule A. So this one shows that the revenue in our general operating fell short of our budget in FY19. Special education reimbursement looks like the area that was the cause of the largest shortfall in revenue. Since this revenue is based on a formula involving how much you spent during the year, it makes sense, because if you look at the expenditure side of this report, you'll see that the expenditures were also under budget. So the revenue is going to follow that. Page 72, Schedule B. one thing that people will notice is that the original budget column shows a different total than the adopted budget, and the final budget is something different. So the first reason that this happens is that when you have voter-approved articles, in addition to your budget approval, you have to add those numbers together in this report in order to show that you have not overspent your appropriations, because you had voter approval to do both. You had voter approval to spend X during the current fiscal year, and you had voter approval to fund those deficits or transfer money to a capital improvement fund. So that's why you see those numbers being different. Let's see. And this was the page where I found the math clerical error, and it does wrap to other pages. It's correct in this version that you're looking at on paper. Just to give you an idea of the dollar amount was like $4,375 that it was off, so it wasn't, and the totals were correct, it just wasn't including one particular line item.
And that's on this page, 72.
It was on this page 72, yep. It does affect a couple other pages in here, but not ones that I'm noting. And they just felt it was better to just issue us a whole new draft, just to make sure, because they're doing this in a software, so they plug the new number in, make it add, and then it wraps to all the places that it's supposed to. The actual result of this page shows that we actually spent less than our overall appropriations by $215,970, but of course, because we had less revenue as well, that doesn't end us with a surplus. Page 62, Schedule 1.
62?
62. This is Schedule 1. So something that has always been a question for many people is that this schedule does not treat all expenditures and revenues exactly the way we treat them in our books. And this is because of things like rebates, prior year expenditures that show up in the current year. They treat those as netted against an expenditure. They see a rebate as a decrease to an expenditure. A prior year invoice is an addition to an expenditure. So we treat them as revenues. And they can be positive or negative, but they show up in our revenue lines. But for them, they treat them differently. They net them against expenses. So that's why this report, in some cases, when you're trying to map them to our reports, it's hard to follow. But at the end, at the bottom line of the report, the balances are the same. Let's see.
Is there a reason you don't do it their way?
Yeah.
Our accounting system doesn't do it their way. This is the only schedule that they have that actually treats them that way either. So if you look at the other schedules, they've got them listed up under revenue. It's just the particular way that this schedule is created, and it's my understanding that it's their software that does it this way. It's an auditing software, and it's different than just a normal accounting software that a school district would use. And so the last thing, and actually on this particular page, you can also see that the approved appropriations were underspent by the $215,970, same dollar value. So at the end of the day, all the schedules do match. It's just a different treatment of the numbers.
Okay.
Our management letter, that's the letter where they tell us advice about things we could be doing differently. We had 4 items on the list this year.
What pages?
It's at the very end of your document, I believe. It's a 2-page, it's a front and a back. So the top is a letter, and then when you look at the back, you can see the 4 items that they are basically giving us advice on. So the first one, liability account reconciliations. This was a big topic in this year's audit. So what happened is it rose to the surface that our benefit liability accounts, so basically when we're paying for people's health insurance, their dental insurance, all of the things.
Can you stop just a second? I'm sorry. I got lost because I'm not where you are. I'm not seeing the management letter in here. Is anyone else
At the
seeing it?
very end of the audit.
Yeah, I've got
There's
some
some
check
income.
marks. I don't
Is it
see
in
the
the
list.
audit?
Go
Was it
back
in the
one more.
packet?
Go back one more. Keep going back.
And there's a list.
Page 102 that you're looking at?
What's that?
102?
This is internal control. I don't think we have the management letter.
Yeah, I didn't quite find it either.
I know it was,
Electronic.
I know, I saw it, that's
Only
why I
in the
was.
electronic?
That didn't change in the formula, so.
It's online in your.
Oh, it's
in your
on the
folder.
online one.
Okay.
Okay, and that one?
Thank you.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
because it didn't change. That's probably why I
Okay.
didn't copy the new copy of it. Yeah, I thought it was here, but
There's the management.
I probably did not. Okay, so I didn't copy it in the paper. But the one that's online, attached to the very end, is correct and the same. Has not changed. Okay. All right. So the liability account reconciliations, basically we pay all of our benefits, and we, at this district, had all of those liability accounts running through one account, one withholding account. It was virtually impossible to actually reconcile it. The auditors didn't really touch it last year, and whatever balance was there was sitting there. And as we combed through it this year, surfaced a large debit balance sitting in a liability account, which clearly was not supposed to be there. So as we combed through and reconciled the entire year of 2019, we were able to determine that the cause of the dollar figure sitting there was not FY19. It existed and accumulated before FY19. So for this reason, the auditors decided that it was best to restate your fund balance. That's the reason why, instead of having a surplus this year, we actually did not have the money we thought we had. It's because of this liability reconciling, and it's $210,632 that they restated the fund balance from FY18 to reconcile that liability balance. This fiscal year, before they even left our building, we actually split out all of those accounts into their each own withholding account, and we are reconciling them monthly. It's a lot more efficient, and you can actually reconcile down to the person and the benefit that way. So this audit point has been resolved this fiscal year, basically before they left our building. And then,
Do we know that it was from FY18, or did they just, like, because, I mean, that,
I would not say that it could have possibly all come from FY18.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. The only thing that could accumulate up to that dollar amount would possibly be health insurance premiums for maybe summer pays for 2 full months, possibly on the whole group of staff. I mean, but that's a lot of money, and it would have to be the employer side of the benefits, not the employee side, because employees only pay a smaller percentage of their benefits. So health insurance is definitely the one that has the largest, transaction activity going through. I would have to say it had to be accumulating in that liability account before you consolidated.
but we're going to call this we're going to restate 2018.
They restated
We're just going to be
18.
done with it.
Yep, it's done.
Okay.
And now your balance is reconciling separately on, say 10 different liability accounts instead of one. And it's being reconciled monthly in the current year it's happening.
Okay.
So as everything passes through payroll and the bills are paid, it's getting reconciled. So it can't accumulate, and we'll see something if something's wrong before the auditors close out the year.
And we talked about this like 3 meetings ago,
Yeah,
when we tried to figure out, did anybody not get paid or something like that?
Yes.
And we know
Yep.
that that's true, that did not happen.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. The second one they brought up was federal procurement. So this is in regards to your federal grants. This was not a surprise to my office. This is the sole reason why, when we updated, I think it was one of the financial policies, we changed some of the wording in one of those. Our district office actually went through all the procedures and policies regarding federal procurement on grants and revamped the forms, the procedures for everyone, distributed that out, had meetings about it. This was all done in February to April of 2019, and we did that knowing that basically the forms were outdated, the procedures were outdated, things were not being adequately enforced, and so that was why we did this even before the auditors had it on a management letter. The auditors, if you read the management letter, you can see they're actually noting that all of this happened prior to them arriving and doing the audit, and the findings that they found where they weren't quite 100% followed were all occurrences before those policies and procedures were implemented in FY19. So that one there again, is resolved even before fiscal year 19 closed.
So we changed that policy that we changed.
did.
Is F41.
Yep.
And we changed it
We-
in May 20, 2019.
Which was immediately following the actual procedures and forms getting all
Right,
revised.
right.
So, perfect timing. The third one they have is student activity accounts. This was a combination of things that they noticed during their audit. It was proper documentation, cash counting, copies of deposits, timely deposit of funds being collected. We believe that a portion of this issue is just regarding how student activities are done. You know, they're doing a fundraising event, an advisor might collect the funds from it. How long does it take that advisor to deliver it to the front office? And then, of course, the front office has to do their process, get it to the bank, make the deposit. So that's where we kind of went with this, and we've already communicated amongst our administration and the staff. And it's already, that part of it's already been corrected this year as far as the timely deposits. There's been notification going out to advisors saying, okay, you've had this event, can you please turn in any funds collected? And so there's a little more proactivity in collecting the funds faster to get them into the bank faster. The other issues surrounding documentation are still being worked on. These don't appear to be issues of not having the correct procedures. It's just maybe not following them every single time. So it's a matter of enforcement on our part. So we're working on that. And then the last one they have is
What-
our
just-
repeat offender.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Because we tried to fix that one as well with a new policy, cash handling policy,
Yes.
F44, which we approved
Which is where this
in
cash,
June.
if you read the actual auditor write-up, they talk about a cash count sheet so that someone is double counting all the cash collected
Yeah.
and signing off. So that was one of the things they said they're being used, but not every single event
Okay.
was using them. So it's
Okay.
like they found 2 or 3 that didn't have the cash count sheet or something amongst all of the things that happen in the course of the year. But it's, regardless, it's something that you want to be consistent in using. It safeguards everyone, you know, in making sure that everything was collected and deposited correctly. The last one is, as I noted, our repeat offender. This one is financial policies. It is those pesky 3 financial policies that we rewrote during FY '19, and we got one of them approved during the fiscal year through both the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee and the Board. One we just barely had approved at one of our most recent board meetings, which was the fund balance one, is the one we just approved. That's the second one, but of course it happened after this audit closed. And the third one, we still have under review for some edits between the Policy and Finance Committee and our office. So that one, we need to get approved this year, basically, so that we can get that off of our audit point. What's that?
You don't know the number for that?
I don't recall the number. I think it was,
I
I think
can
it was
find
the
it.
investment policy, was it the investment? It was the investment one.
Yeah.
And we were just dicing over the wording of the policy. It's, you know, it's written, and we were kind of editing some of the wording and kind of checking it against statute and other policies in other school districts, so.
It's on the policy committee's to-do list.
There we go. It's on mine too, because there was a couple things that we basically were trying to look up for the policy committee. So in all fairness, it's not just, you know, it's basically getting input from the policy committee, us going back, finding and researching the questions they ask, and then, you know, basically solidifying the language in there and then running it by the board, so. That's all I've got on the audit. Yes.
I want to point out that I believe this is the 3rd management letter. Is that a correct statement? This is the 3rd management letter for this board? Or is this only the
Yes,
2nd? I
so
believe
your
it's-
first management letter would have been based on the year that was not consolidated, though, correct? Right?
Right.
So you were reviewing a management letter from
All 5,
all 5,
right.
right? Yeah.
But I want to point out that this is the shortest list we've had. And it's in great part due to the work you've done and Sheila and somewhat Joanne before that, but really, thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate my whole business office because I feel like they've worked really hard on all of these. They tend to be the ones who bring up some of these things, and they're the full reason why we're able to solve the problems before the year's even over or the audit even comes out. So they work really hard on that.
Are there any other questions or comments for Elizabeth? Okay, student reports?
Sure. So our first half of our year has closed out. I believe jump rope is still not working because I tried to log in just now and I couldn't, which is for teachers to like get their like final grades together. Also, a new group has been started. Una can speak to this more
Yeah.
because she's been to more of the meetings that I have been, but is the Racial
It's the
Social
Racial
Justice
and
Alliance?
Social Justice Alliance, which has formed, we're having our next meeting actually tomorrow, to kind of review our school's policies around inclusion, especially racial inclusion and diversity within our own school, review some of our policies and how incidences have been handled, as well as fitting into the broader framework of movements in our state and country around racial and social justice.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well put. And this is more of a personal side. I hope that that ongoing conversation does not stop at that specific group of students, because I think it's important for the whole, high school, middle school, and the whole district to be having this conversation together. But that's all I have.
All right. So adding on, the Racial and Social Justice group has started and has some plans, as well as the Communicating School Redesign team recently did a data analysis retreat to go review some of the data from a survey that was given to middle and high school students and educators throughout the high school. We will, as a group, be coming to you later with more information on that data, but I think it was good to just show that there's been coordinated outreach to see our school's strengths and our weaknesses and what we can do to improve upon that. As Alder said, the grading period has closed, and it was our first one with this new proficiency-based grading. While we have the grading, the learning is still forming and not implemented evenly or thoroughly or throughout the classes and the school. So there was, of course, some ups and downs and students trying to figure out what their grades meant and whether or not they were on high honors. There was a lot of confusion, I noted, among students about what constituted honors, what constituted passing, and what constituted high honors. A few students have said that they felt like high honors was too low, honors was too low and high honors was too high, was a common complaint. And as we move forward, I think it's really important to remember that when rolling out changes with such a massive impact across our school, we need to focus on the whole picture and make sure that these are beneficial to students and being rolled out in a way that is clear and understandable and communicated to students and staff why we are doing this and how it impacts our lives and the importance of it. And that we have proficiency-based grading. We're still working on the learning, and I really want to stress that a grading system, just because you implement a grading system does not mean that you have implemented a learning system yet. Yeah, that is my report. That's good.
Can I just, I want to correct something, it's not, the jump rope is not working, it is that the jump rope parent portal and student portal is closed temporarily while teachers finalize their grades for the quarter 2 and semester 1.
that there's a process, we have to pull those grades into PowerSchool. We want to make very sure that they're accurate and consistent, and I think that's reasonable to give teachers a few days to do that. We did that at the end of quarter one as well. The portal, we anticipate the portal will be open on Friday. And we're also, I don't know if you've noticed, if you're parents, you know that you're getting progress reports. That's something that was never part of the PowerSchool system, so those progress reports will go out as well.
But you compare progress reports to similar to a report card though? So like there was a system of reporting in the old system as well?
At the end of the year. We didn't send anything home regularly.
So I'd like to just acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that both administrations put in, the high school administrations put in, but also the teachers. This is a new system, and it's a lot of work. And I, as a parent, I really appreciate what I have seen so far. It's not perfect. There are no perfect systems, but I have seen things that I haven't seen before. So I just wanted to acknowledge the amount of work that the teachers have had to go through in order to make this system work as well.
Definitely, and it was not in any means a critique of teachers. They are all doing an amazing job to work with the information they have been given, but as I noted, the rollout perhaps could have been smoother with a more direct message of this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it.
Sure, and things take time. So, thank you for the report. So, board reports, Hannaford Career Center member?
That's me. So just a few things to share. Sheila mentioned that Grady DeVoyd got chosen as the presidential scholar, the Tech Presidential Scholar recently. And I just wanted to share that MIT was recently visiting Hannaford students who are developing that SAP flow measuring monitoring device that is patent pending, actually, so which potentially is going to make money for the school, from what I understand. So that was really cool. The students are going to be participating at the farm show next week at Champlain Valley Expo. They have a whole competition they participate in, which is called Career Development Events. So those students that are in the ag department. Hannaford is having an open house on February 6th from 4 to 7 o'clock. So if anybody wants to see what's happening there, they love for people to come. And I don't know if anyone has any questions on the board about the budget increase. I do have the summary of what that budget increase, that 23% increase is all about. But if I do have a copy of the breakdown I can share with all of you, or I can read it out loud right now. So.
I would like to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was a
big
huge
increase.
increase.
Big increase.
The first thing I guess I will say is, so the Career Center FTEs are based on a 6-semester average, which to me sounds ridiculous, but whatever. So their FTEs for this next budgeting period is 123.7 students. Their current enrollment FTEs is 147.8. So that right there is just crazy. But anyway, here you go. The HRA increase was 120,000. Health insurance, 51,500. The construction program, which is a new program at Hannaford, which was grant funded last year. It's not grant funded for the coming year. 49,000 for that program. Their BERF fund, which is their maintenance fund, is up 25,000. Legal contingency, 21,000. I don't know what this is. A restored DOS and assistant director. I believe that has to do with accounting. Yeah, it's a director of something.
Yeah, they were going to add a part-time position for next year to convert their accounting system.
Okay.
So that's 37,000. Insurance increase of 11,700, and then other program improvements, which includes salaries, general cost increases, and miscellaneous expenses, is up $81,214. For a grand total increase of $396,414.
Of which our portion is 104.
Right.
I mean, in addition.
That's just the increase, which
That
we just
is.
talked about. So our portion of the increase is
Well,
104.
and our increase was, we increased our budget automatically by like a 2.9%.
Right.
Of what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So really, it's an additional 20% to what we had originally budgeted.
Right.
So that's the 104.
Yeah.
So a big chunk of that is the health insurance
Right.
change, so,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we got.
We got hit with that too.
Everybody's
We got double
getting,
hit.
but,
Right.
do we get this, like, we can't afford, we have to afford, but that is a really, we don't want that to happen next year. Do
we
we
don't.
have any capacity to limit?
We don't really have capacity to limit, but we will be meeting in follow-up to this. We being the 3 superintendents in the region and the superintendent of the Career Center to talk just about communication. There was like an issue with communication. There was on their part, they thought that they had communicated this out, and it was not shared in a timely way with us. So that's part of the problem. I mean, they're going through their budget development process
Sure.
at the same time we are.
Yeah.
And they thought that they had shared this in a way that would have been easier for us to accommodate within our budget process. But as you know, we've been at our budget process for a while, and we are too close for comfort, down to the bone anyway. So any change would have been difficult for us to accommodate.
Right, but I mean,
At
have
any
to have a one-year grant-funded program that now has to go on, like, did
Right.
we know that
I think we should have
that
had more
was-
of a heads up about that, more earlier on. I don't think we should have needed to wait until December really for that level of, we could have anticipated that expense, I would say. Not we, but they could have
Sure.
communicated that anticipated expense. They would have known that, I think, earlier on to be able to share that with us. But
It's also possible that, you know, we don't put out our announced tuition until it's due by the state. You know, we did ours early, we did ours in December, and we got it approved by our board, but you don't legally have to send it out to the Agency of Education or to any other member school districts that might send students to you until January 15th. So that's around about the time when we got the report of how much their tuition was going to go up. So in all fairness, it's kind of like they were announcing their tuition.
Right.
I mean, yes, it could have come earlier, and all of the details of it
Yeah.
should have been
Sure.
talked about as to
Yeah.
why the budget was increasing so much, just because it does help us build all of our budgets. But I think that might be part of the misunderstanding too, is just kind of them thinking that, you know, this is when we put this out, or whatever.
Yeah. But I could definitely share that.
yeah,
Lori?
$37,000 for a position for putting in an accounting system,
I'm not, I'd have to get clarification on that, but I do know that they were looking to hire an additional staff person to help them do this big conversion, because they, you know, their staffing is limited in that capacity.
Right, they have one
Right.
bookkeeping
Yeah.
staff member and their business manager.
Yeah.
That's what they have. So.
Yeah.
and are we geared up for that?
We're not hiring a position to help us, if that's what you mean. Yeah.
And apparently, there's talk on the state level, this like got thrown out, that they're talking about funding tech centers, or tech centers becoming independent school districts, I guess, if you will, separate and apart from towns, so.
Have you heard any talk about the idea of funding them with you talked about the 6-semester average. I've heard people mention something about changing how they're funding that. I mean, I think the
That would probably
intent of the
help.
6-semester average
Yeah.
was based on trying to keep those budgets from, you know, based on enrollment,
Right.
keep them from going like
Leveling
this.
out the noise.
You
Yeah.
know, basically have them a little more flat, but in this case, I don't think it's helping them.
Definitely not.
They came to us in August and talked about shifting into IB. And
That's under the works, too.
so I guess, I don't know what the financial impacts of that might be, but I guess as you and the other superintendents go there, I don't know that we want to fund Middlebury's IB program.
fair.
Like, I mean, I get reasons for it, but,
Yep.
um,
Yep, fair question.
Yeah.
Here. Thank you.
So, the Facilities Committee, there's a report that I submitted last week. Just very briefly, we have talked about, and I mentioned this at the December meeting. We would like, the committee has decided that we would like to ask the board as a whole to release money from the Capital Investment Fund to fund engineering design work for mitigating the water drainage problem at FCS. And there's an action item about that. This fits within the procedures for the use of the Capital Reserve Fund that we talked about last May. It's a long-term thing. It's dealing with health and safety, and we don't have the money in our budget to deal with it. In the conversations in the Facilities Committee, it seemed like between 15,000 or so would probably be sufficient to do this design work, and so we're going to ask for the board to release up to 20,000 in case it's necessary. Do people have questions or concerns about that? No. The other thing that I wanted to point out was that in February, at our February meeting, the administration is going to be giving us an update on the report and safety issues in the district per policy F32, the School Crisis Prevention and Response Policy. So we'll have a report for that presumably at the February meeting. Negotiations Committee?
We have met with both the teachers and the support staff. We're meeting again with the support staff next week and the teachers at the end of February.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Community engagement?
The community, I attached here the committee minutes from our last meeting. The committee is due to meet next week on January 30th. We did kind of brainstorm some ideas on types of engagement and some possible ideas on topics. We talked about having like different events, one topic per evening kind of thing. We did sort of nail down that we really want to hone in on long-term goals and objectives for any engagement work we're going to do moving forward. So kind of, our 3 to 5 year outlook, if you will. So I'm just curious if based on where we're headed next year, if there's anything in addition that any of you want the committee to talk about next week in terms of engagement or, the middle school will certainly be something down the road once the task force gets going and whatever they decide they may need help with, but there's that for sure moving forward. But if there's anything else that anyone?
Lori?
I have a question. This may not be for you, Christina, but the task force, is it going to make the decision 5-6? Is that going to be a board decision?
So if you read the report that I put together, I kind of laid out what they're going to be studying, different models, and coming forward with a recommendation. And it's hard to sort of talk about this in general terms. Some things, I think, would require that report or findings from the report to come forward to the board. Other things would be decisions that educators would make. So for example, how they want a team in the school is not something that the board would necessarily have input into. Changing ideas about location would be something we'd have to be in communication with the board about. So I guess that's sort of what you're asking. So when you say 5, 6, I'm assuming you're meaning 6 through 8 or 5 through 8? Is that
Right.
what you're, yes.
That's
So
correct.
that is one of the things they're going to be taking up in their study of this as a topic.
And will they consider cost? And, I mean, like, that's one of the reasons we're.
Correct.
Right?
So there
Okay.
will be sort of like parameters around, obviously, we can't build a
Capacity.
new school. Like,
Right.
that's not going to be one of the things that's up for debate, right? So given these parameters, here are the ways you can think through this problem.
So another thought in that line is there was quite a lot of community feedback about the 5-6 model, so hopefully they would take a look at that summary report in their
Sure.
in their work. That would be great. A couple other things that came up too were conducting an exit poll during the budget vote. I don't know if we can talk more about that maybe next month, but that was something that came up too in our conversations the last time we met. Possibly doing building walkthroughs of the schools to invite community in to see the schools. So anyway, if you have any other ideas or you know how to get in touch with me.
Christina, when's the next meeting?
Next
Sorry.
week, January 30th.
Thank you. Any other questions for Christina? No. For the chair's report, I'm going to read Sue's report, and then I have an addendum to it, so I apologize for this will take 5 minutes maybe. Looking ahead, goodbye and board changes. First, I would like to extend a huge thank you. So I'm reading Sue's report right now, sorry. I would like to extend a huge thank you to George Lawrence and Lori Gutowski for their many years of dedicated service on our school boards. George and Lori will not be seeking re-election when their terms end in March. George has served for 13 years and Lori for 20. George's expertise and energy was pivotal in securing our district's energy efficiency project. During his tenure, he served on a variety of committees and always pushed for facility maintenance and student equity across our 5 towns. Likewise, we are grateful for Lori's commitment to community engagement in the years she served on the negotiations committee and as board chair. Thank you both and best wishes. After much thought and consideration, I, Sue, have also decided not to seek re-election this March. I am enormously proud of the work accomplished by this board, and it's been an honor to work alongside each of you. I'm grateful to see that the other community members are interested in serving. The systems established by the board during the first 4 years of this district will enable continuity as new members join. On a personal note, I will enjoy more time with my family and greater ability to focus on my career. When the board reorganizes in March, Tom Borchert, me, does not intend to continue in the position of vice chair. He will be away on sabbatical this spring and likely phoning into meetings. And she thanks me as well. Board reorganization. At the March, so this is, again, looking forward. At the March 9th meeting, the board will reorganize. This entails election of a chair, vice chair, school board clerk, and board representative to the Hannaford Career Center. Reestablishment of standing board committees, charges, and membership. Please review and consider your current committee assignments. Approval of meeting schedule, newspaper of record, official posting places for agenda and minutes, use of Robert's rules and codes of ethics. And there's some statements about the schedule. The third thing she points out are the dates of the legislative breakfasts. The Addison County Legislative Breakfast will take place on 2/3/2020 at St. Peter's Church in Vergennes, on February 10th in Middlebury EMS on 55 Collins Street, and March 16th at the Bristol American Legion. Breakfast is served at 7, and the program runs from 7:30 to 8:45. Governor Scott is scheduled to be the featured speaker at the Bristol breakfast. For a full schedule of legislative breakfasts, see the Addison Independent. And there's a website there. Respectfully submitted, Sue Rakowski. I have a couple additional notes that I will give to Lori. I also wanted to thank George and Lori. To Gloria. I'm going to give the notes to Glory. I also want to thank George and Lori. I learned a great deal from working with them on the policy committee, especially when considering questions of equity and opportunity. And George's participation was invaluable in formulating and facilitating the implementation of the work around the energy performance bond that the board did in 2018. I also want to note especially the work of Sue Rakowski over the last several years. Sue's been an exemplary chair. She is attentive to the rules of running a board as well as the laws. She's worked tirelessly to make sure that we are moving forward. A lot of the work of the board chair is pretty invisible, even to the board, and she's given significant amount of time to do that work. In my time on various school boards in this district, I feel fortunate to have been able to watch and learn from two excellent chairs in both Lori Childers and Sue Rakowski. Sue's kept the interests of all the students of the district in her mind as she's pushed us to adapt to the changing circumstances. Not everyone has agreed with the decisions of the board over the last 3 years that she has been chair either in the community or on the board, but I think we are in a much better place as a board and a district because of her, and I'm deeply grateful for her work. 2, the process for handling the petitions. So at the last meeting, the board made a procedural mistake. At the start of the meeting, we went into an executive session to receive a report from Superintendent Soul and Chair Rakowski about communication from our lawyer. The majority of the work of the board must take place in open and accessible to the public, but as most of you know, there are statutory exceptions that allow a school board to go into executive session. With some of these executive session exceptions to open meeting requirements, the board must make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage. That last was a quote. Before entering executive session. One of the exceptions that must have a specific finding to support executive session is quote, confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body. And this is a quote from the Vermont, the statute. That's right, thank you. It is possible to do this in a single motion, to have both the finding and the move to go into executive in a single motion. But procedurally, it would have been better, and by which I mean clearer, to do this in 2 separate motions. According to the draft minutes, which we will approve in a few minutes, the board discussed the issue but did not make a separate finding before going into executive session. Substantively, the board acted properly, but procedurally, we did not follow the correct course of action. We should have made a separate finding before voting on going into executive session. We should have made and passed the following motion. I move that we find that it is necessary to go into executive session on the issue of attorney-client communications about a petition submitted to the board because premature public knowledge of the legal advice would place the district at a substantial disadvantage. It's a mouthful. At that point, we as a board could have talked about whether or not we found it necessary to go into executive session. The determination of that motion, that is our finding, would then be the basis of our motion to go into executive or not. So in order to fix the mistake that we made last week, we have an action item for this meeting to, quote, approve the finding of need for executive session on 1/13/2020, unquote. So this is a retroactive remedy for our mistake. I speak on behalf of the board here in saying that we will do our best to avoid this kind of procedural mistake in the future. Sorry, one more point that I wanted to make about public discussion and democracy. So Sue shared with me last week that she received a harassing and threatening phone call. She didn't talk to the person who left a message on her work phone, and she reported it to the police. I don't know if any of the rest of you have received such phone calls recently or in the past, but I'm deeply troubled by it, as I think we all should be. I do not think it is a coincidence that the call came after the Addison Independent's recent issue proclaiming that we, the Addison Northwest School District Board, have abandoned democracy. I think the Independent is wrong here. Democracy takes a number of forms, and the public has had and will continue to have many occasions to affect the process and the decisions that we make. They voted for us as school board members. They vote for the budget every year in the past and into the future. The 5 towns voted for the unification of the district, and they voted for the legislators that created Act 46 that drove this unification. Individual members of the public serve on board committees, such as the Community Engagement Committee and the Facilities Committee, and they also serve on search committees for principals and superintendents. The people have a say at many steps in these processes. But just as a school board meeting is a public meeting, not a meeting of the public, individuals do not get to speak at all times. Moving forward, we continue to welcome public input, and we encourage people to run for seats on the board and to participate on our committees. But I also note that we, the board, have a legal and ethical responsibility to ensure a system that provides the best education we are capable of for all of the children of the district without also crippling the taxpayers of the 5 towns. In the 4 years I've been on this board, I think we have always strived to understand community interests and needs and to communicate that back to the community. We do listen and we seek to engage. We strive to follow open meeting laws, which is not always easy. We do not always do this perfectly, but no one on this board in public or private conversation has ever said anything that would indicate we ignore the community or disdain the community's voice. We may not agree, but that is not the same thing. For the most part, I've found the public discussion of the very difficult issues we've been talking about for the last 6 months to be reasonable, concerned, and civil. I would hope that it remains so as we move forward, all focused on providing an excellent education for our community's children.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
So I think we'll move on to the action items.
I
Please.
move that we approve the minutes of January 13, 2020.
I'll second.
Any questions, any additions, corrections?
So you're going to make a correction to that, or you're going to have a separate item regarding the executive session?
Oh, we have a separate, we are going to have the separate item. It's going to go in these minutes, not
Okay.
those minutes.
Okay.
We're not going to correct those minutes because we are doing it today, not last week.
Those minutes were correctly written.
Those minutes were correctly written, and they reflected what we did last week. So hearing no further questions or comments, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes.
All right. I move that we approve the changes to policy C40.
Second.
Okay.
Any questions, any concerns?
I'll just
John?
say a couple of things. We've changed some policies before, but there has never, in my time here, been a policy that has been as transparently warned for us and for all of the community to talk about, to hear and get feedback from. And we've been talking about it for about 6 months, and I believe it's time that we pass these changes to policy C40.
Any other, Lori?
With all respect to all the parents we have in this community, it feels unfair that Addison is getting repurposed and Ferrisburg gets to keep everything. And I thought of this the other day, and I wrote an email to Sue and Sheila and wondered if there was any interest, thoughts, whatever, what if we had all the kids for the district, 1 through 4 go to VUES, and 5 and 6 goes to FCS, and with the idea, and then additionally, we could start transitioning the central office to FCS. And that would get the 5-6 kids together, all the 5-6 kids together under the idea that, anyway, it was just a thought. It bothers me a lot that Addison is getting, anyway, the only trouble this year.
This policy doesn't prevent that.
Yes, it does, because K through 4 go to Ferrisburg. Kids in Ferrisburg go to Ferrisburg. So the policy would have to be K through 4, all go to BUS.
I'll only say a couple of things. I mean, we've been taught, we've gone back a lot on what to do here. Going back to, making another change like that would just, in my view, add much more confusion. This policy change makes crystal clear where the students of this district are going to be attending. And it allows us to have the kind of conversation that we want to have over the next year so that in 2021, we can have the opportunity to do a thing that this district has needed and we have decided and we have wanted for a really long time, and that is to strengthen the middle school. And this policy change now gives us that opportunity to do those things. And I think that we need to pass this. I think it's time to pass this.
Other comments?
I would just like to stress when thinking about this, there is a lot of changes that have come in the past 2 years, starting with at the high school level with our shifted grading, and this year with the talk of school closures, the votes, and rearranging students. And as members of the board and members of the community, think long and hard how this is going to impact our students. Elementary school kids are at their most impressionable ages. Middle school students, their brains are developing just as fast as a newborn baby's. And so rearranging and shifting students in manners until eventually something clicks is harmful and dangerous to students, and without having a thought-out plan that has engaged the community and the students who are most affected, this is going to end up being a policy that, no matter its best intentions, will harm. Not that just like, so I would say that just think before you vote and before you start moving students at the most impressionable age of their development beyond very early childhood around into different schools and putting them with students who are much older and at much greater developmental places. A fifth grader and a senior thinking about going into college are two very different spaces.
This doesn't actually deal with this. This is an
I'm just saying because it allows for fifth and sixth graders to go to the
I understand.
high school at some point. So I'm just saying, think and remember that slotting students around in different places is a dangerous thing to do.
Do other people have comments that they'd like to add?
I understand your frustration, Lori, but I also realize there's no... I understand the frustration Lori has, but I also realize there's really no feasible way that we could make that kind of change with the budgeting timeline that we have. That would, to be able to try and throw that together in a week would be impossible.
Because you're saying that change would
Moving
affect...
kids, moving faculty, having to repurpose buildings, having to,
Right.
that there's...
You're right. You're absolutely right. And contracts are coming on the first week. Okay, thank you.
Just to sort of piggyback on what Una was saying, I don't think it's in disagreement with this. We've talked at length as a board about how making the fewest number of moves for students is the best move for students. And and we've acknowledged that these discussions are not done after this year. This problem has not been solved. To make an arrangement where we're potentially removing students 2 years down the road doesn't seem like best practice either. Making a move now for some students with the hopes that this gets us to where we need to be, and if not, to move another group of students down the line without having to like uproot the multiple groups, I think is, if that made any sense, seems like the best policy or approach.
C40 may change again. Yeah, Alder.
I think that as a whole, we don't give children enough credit for their resilience. And I don't think I think there's a natural instinct to be protective of your kids and other people's kids. I think that's totally understandable and reasonable, but I don't think that moving kids around, it's gonna be very harmful with them. And I'll share a personal example. When I was in 4th grade, fairly young, I moved to this school district, and I turned out fine.
But I'd also say you weren't in 7th grade when your brain is developing.
So,
I mean, yeah, but I was
Rapidly.
still at a young, impressionable age, and there are people who move around all the time, regardless of what age they are. And I think that, those are people, in most cases, like, they are leaving the community that they have been in and, like, on their own going to another, and most of those students turn out okay. And I think that, yes, like, a change will probably mean some sort of complication for that student, but they're also, moving with their friends that they've had, from one building to another. I think that the support structure that they have with their peers is not going to be ruffled. And I think that is really important, and I think for that reason that these changes will not negatively impact students in the long term.
Christine?
So I know I said this last week, that I really feel strongly it's time for us to really embrace the one family, we're one group of educators and students and families, and we've got resources at our disposal, and we're trying to make our resources work for everybody as one whole group, not individual groups of students any longer. So just the more we can start to frame that conversation in that way, we're slowly making progress there, and it's painful and it's hard, but I do think, thank you, George, that I'm really trying to look at us as one family.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing, I'm sorry. Can I say one more thing? Look, I'm really, this is the right move, I believe, for our district. And I know that there's a lot of concern about middle school and all that, and it's rightfully so. I don't, but there's no plan to move any middle school grade at all this year. I was ready to do that. I was ready to make scenario 3 happen, because I think that's the right move for this district and the place that we're going to end up being, because our enrollment is going to continue to decline. But the community is not ready, the middle school teachers are not ready. I'm not sure the administration said that they are ready to take some time, and we have a good plan in place to get a task force together, led by a number of people in this room, and passing this now gets us on the path to that change after those discussions happen.
So hearing no further conversation, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Abstain? The motion passes. Action item D.
See.
C, we on C? I'm
Sure,
sorry. Could I get a motion for the bills and directors' orders? I don't know who's doing it this.
Oh, was that a while? I did do that, didn't I?
We did do it early in the.
Because I thought it was for last week. Yes. Gloria, you have the numbers? Because I was forgetting that I did it.
I guess that's fine, I can find them. Can we go on to D, is that possible?
Let's just go ahead and,
Oh, you said
Somebody make a
glory,
motion.
not glory.
Mark is gonna make a motion.
Yes, right.
Glory,
I
glory, glory.
move that we approve pay
Bills and directors' orders.
general in the amount of, sorry, student activity in the amount of $55,076.23. Payroll in the amount of $1,306,131, and general in the amount of $3,295,598.81.
Second?
General is 3 million?
Yeah,
That-
yeah. There were 2 months' worth of health insurance, and health insurance runs
Oh, okay.
between 300,000 and 400,000 a month.
Yep.
And we had a bond payment, I think,
Yep.
in there,
It was-
it was like 1.2
1.8
million.
million.
Eight million, okay, that's not quite true, but, so that.
Those two things were the.
They were
Got
the
it,
biggest
got it.
reason.
And almost $500,000 went to Hannaford.
To Hannaford's.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I did do my standard, go through the bills randomly and some payroll and tracked it back to the original sources, and everything seemed fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Now
Okay.
we're on D.
Okay, all right, here goes. I move that we find that it is necessary to go into executive session on the issue of attorney-client communications about a petition submitted to the board because premature public knowledge of the legal advice would place the district at a substantial disadvantage.
Second?
Comments or questions?
I think you explained it all earlier.
Hearing-
Actually, learning about this, I was surprised that just attorney-client privilege in general needs
A finding.
to be a finding. It's attorney-client privilege for a reason, but,
Yeah.
and we pretty much, I think, nothing we learned in our executive session was held back when we came out into public. But we didn't know anything about what our attorneys had said, and it seemed prudent to hear what our attorneys were telling us before we shared that information, because we didn't know what that information was.
I would agree with Mark.
Thank you.
So, hearing no further comment, would those in favor of the motion please say aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes.
Okay.
Please go on. Number
I
F.
move we approve the warnings for the annual meeting.
Second?
Do we
Okay,
have
okay.
those somewhere?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm gonna read them. Warning, Addison Northwest School District Annual Meeting, February 24th, 2020. The legal voters of the Addison Northwest School District, consisting of the towns of Addison, Ferrisburg, Panton, Vergennes, and Waltham, are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Vergennes Union High School in Vergennes, Vermont on Monday, February 24th, 2020 at 6 p.m. to learn about the 2020-2021 budget and transact any of the following business. Article 1, to elect the following officers: A, moderator; B, clerk; C, treasurer. Article 2, to authorize stipends to be paid district officers, including the directors, clerk, and treasurer. Article 3, to authorize the Board of Directors under 16 VSA 562, paragraph 9, to borrow money by issuance of bonds or notes not in excess of anticipated revenue for the school year. Article 4, to authorize the Board of Directors to electronically submit the annual report. Article 5, to elect a community representative to serve on the Patricia A. Hannaford Regional Technical School District Board of Directors for a term of 3 years. Article 6, to hear and act upon the reports of the Addison Northwest School District officers. There's also being warned a public information hearing on February 24th, 2020. The legal voters of the Addison Northwest School District are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Virgins Union High School in Virgins, Vermont on Monday, February 24th, 2020 at 7 p.m. for a public information meeting to discuss Australian ballot articles warned for vote on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020. Hearing will take place immediately following adjournment of the annual meeting of said Addison Northwest School District, dated this day, et cetera, and by Sue. Then warning Addison Northwest School District, March 3rd, 2020. The legal voters of the Addison Northwest School District, consisting of the towns of Addison, Ferrisburgh, Panton, Virgins, and Waltham, are hereby notified and warned to meet at the following polling places on March 3rd, 2020 to vote by Australian ballot on the following articles of business. Municipality polling hours. Locations: Addison 7 to 7 at the Addison Town Clerk's office, Ferrisburgh 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Ferrisburgh Town Office, Panton 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. in Panton Town Hall, Virgins 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Virgins Fire Station, Waltham 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Waltham Town Hall. Article 7, shall the voters of the Addison Northwest School District approve the Board of School Directors to expend $21,842,594, which is the amount that the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in a projected education spending of $19,755.80 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 3.22% higher than spending for the current year. Article 8. Shall the voters of the Addison Northwest School District vote to establish a health insurance reserve fund pursuant to the provisions of 24 VSA paragraph 2804 for the purpose of funding health insurance premiums, health reimbursement account costs, or health savings account costs, and authorize assignment of any unspent budget funds for such at the close of each fiscal year up to an amount not to exceed a cumulative balance of $200,000. Ballots shall be commingled and counted at Virgins Union High School by representatives of the boards of civil authority of the member town school district under the supervision of the district clerk of the Addison Northwest School District. Dated this day, et cetera, Sue Rakowski, Chair, Board of Directors. Comments, questions? Did we warn both, did we move both things? Did we?
It said warnings, plural, yes.
Warnings, plural, okay.
I move to, where we approve warnings.
Great. Hearing no questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Sue will sign these tomorrow morning. Let's see, action item F.
I move that the board release up to $20,000 from the Capital Investment Fund for the purpose of paying for engineering design work to mitigate the water drainage problem at Ferrisburgh Central School.
Second.
Questions, comments, concerns? George?
My understanding, I believe, is that the $20,000 is to get more concrete proposals to understand what it's going to cost to mitigate the problem.
So.
Is that true?
This will produce biddable documents that can go, so that we can go out for a request for proposals to actually mitigate, to do the construction work.
But to be clear, $20,000 is not going to solve the problem.
Right.
It could be many.
Hundreds of
many-
thousands.
Right.
Hundreds
Yes.
of thousands potentially. So
Yes.
just to find out what.
This,
simply it
this,
is.
that's correct.
Fact finding. It's
We need
finding
to
a
spend
best
this money,
design.
figure out how much money we need to spend.
Yeah.
My only comment is, I would prefer to not spend that money now and potentially wait a year to find out what we plan to actually do with that building. So that would be my suggestion.
The only problem is it could be a health and safety issue, and we have students in the building, so.
But we're testing weekly?
No,
regularly,
No.
now we're out of
monthly?
testing
Well, it's so
money,
cold out now, it doesn't-
right?
We're
So-
we're testing less
Yeah.
than we have because we've used up those funds, and we're also using, the HVAC system is running at full capacity all pretty much constantly in order to avoid the mold potentially moving up. So we are also hindering our own efforts in using energy efficiently, because we can't run the building as efficiently as we were able to last year.
I guess the other thing too is that what we learned from this is it could inform what we ultimately decide to do with the building, right? Depending on what the findings are.
And the reason that the testing got cut back was because of the fact that they were not finding any problem with the air in the occupied spaces. And there was no money in the first place to do any of that testing. That was something that our facilities director scrounged out of his budget. So there's other things that aren't happening that money was allocated for. And so we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. We've got to do something to fund a change.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? The motion passes.
All right. I move we accept a donation in the amount of $500 from Energy North Incorporated.
Second?
Any comments?
Thank you, Energy North.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstain? The motion passes. And H.
I move that we approve the funding of the FY19 deficit in the child nutrition program in the amount of $49,064.07.
Second?
I assume we know what this is about.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any comments?
So-
Oh, yeah, sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead, please.
just
No, that's fine.
clarification, this is 49,000 that we're moving out of FY 19-20 budget. We're paying for it in FY 19-20 budget.
We're paying for it in the current year.
Okay, and even though we're doing that, we're still hoping we'll pretty much break even, we hope. Okay. We'll find out.
Indeed.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes. We're only 15 minutes late on our agenda here, so moving on to board discussion.
Yeah.
45?
Yes.
No, I'm seeing 7:30 on board discussion.
Yeah.
I got 7.
Oh, sorry. Well.
Good try, Tom.
So the discussion is to review the draft of the annual report, which hopefully we have some copies of.
Enough for people to maybe share and look on.
Yes.
We didn't bring a copy, because we didn't want to waste the paper
And,
to.
and also to talk about the sample budget presentation and the budget talking points for the meeting on February 24th. So, I guess as you're kind of glancing through this, if hopefully you had a chance to look at the budget presentation from last year, and so I wondered if people had comments or concerns, if there was a desire to do essentially the same thing minus all of the discussion about the capital reserves. What's that?
Were there any concerns last year with it?
I didn't have any concerns. I mean, there's a formula that we're required to present, and we have to show the accomplishments. I mean, this is in statute. We have to show places for savings. We have to show student outcome. I mean, it's like a list, and I think this is a good presentation of that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there
Yep.
was objections from
Yeah.
last year. That we should
None.
be thinking about this year.
Not that I remember. You're providing a clearer table, you've told us, a clearer set of tables.
In the annual book, there's a fund
In the annual-
balance analysis. I don't know if that was gone over in the presentation last year. I don't think it was part of it, but it could be if we wanted it to be. And just kind of walk through it as we do the presentation, that would be fine. But it's also going to be in the annual book.
Right. I would assume that we need to talk about how we got here in terms of the series of conversations that have gone on over the last 6 months. Maybe.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
I don't know, you can't really read this and then vote on it. It's something that you needed ahead of time.
Well, this is just a
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
It's just a discussion.
Yeah.
When does this need to go out?
Yeah, but it has to be to the printers in time so that it's available at least 10 days before the annual meeting.
So will we have a chance to make further suggestions at the February 10th? That's too late. So if we were to look at this today, tomorrow, if we had, is it possible to send us an electronic copy? Would that be a I mean, I'm just asking.
Right, so we would rather not share an electronic copy, that's why we're handing it out here
Yeah.
until it's final, just because it's less confusing. If there's
Yeah.
multiple copies out there, it gets confusing.
And are there 3 major differences between last year's annual? Can
I
you
would
just share with
say,
us the major
we've included more graphics from the finances. That's one. So we learned through the budget through our conversations in the fall with the community and so forth, that some of those graphics really resonated and told a story. So we've included those. All of the student assessment data is completely reformatted, so that whole section is new. And I would say that's it. I think because we're not coming out the other end of a performance contract, that section doesn't detail as many of those pieces.
So is there any area of less information versus last year?
Yeah, I think the area around the bond is less, but nevertheless, Ken has been just as busy, so he has a lot of highlights from his work, and I think that's important to keep it in there, because it's a major investment from the taxpayers. Our facilities are a major investment, so I think that's important to include. So I think that kind of sums it up. I don't know, would you add anything? I don't think that's about it.
I don't think so. I think, like I said, we
Oh.
kind of elaborated a little further and maybe included some details in certain reports and pieces that we didn't have included last year.
You probably wouldn't notice this unless you looked really carefully, but the framework for the school-based reports is slightly different. So they're focused more on current accomplishments than anything else. So we restructured that section just slightly. That's a mild change.
Sounds like a good idea.
I think it looks good.
Is there anything in here about the transition or the integration to proficiency-based learning? Because I'm looking at the grading system on page 49.
Staff, was there anything significantly different from last year's report in terms of PBL?
I'd have to look. I mean, we talked about, last year was this past, present, future thing, but the future was the current thing.
Right.
So it was
I know.
hard to know.
Changed that.
Yeah, I know. We were writing it in as if the present hadn't happened yet. So this was a weird. Remember the way the format was. So I'd have to look and see what I wrote.
But the grading system is on the 100-point scale. And we've had all these conversations about 100-point scale, and I'm like, we're sending this out to the community, and we've been talking about 4-point scale, and now 49.
49.
Oh, that's the profile that goes out to, reflective of the transcripts. So that is something that we are required to generate every year, and it kind of communicates important statistics about the school for colleges.
That's this
So-
year's
So it's
profile.
reflecting the current year, so this is reflective of the transcript that students have currently.
Okay.
Yep.
And are we going to touch base on what's happening with the work, the change in the grading system? Is any of that going to go in the annual report?
We weren't necessarily going to include it. It's in our parent handbook, it's on the website. I don't think it's necessarily relevant for the annual report. It's kind of specific.
Would it be useful, well, it is specific, but it's also been a fairly large topic of conversation. So I mean,
Maybe we can incorporate
Well,
some pieces more specific about that if it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, I wrote this a couple weeks ago, so I'd have to be refreshed.
Yeah.
I've written a lot of things since I wrote this. I talk about through your coaching, grade schools partnership, that's all the instructional work that we're doing. So if I just talked about the grading shift, that's not the hard work. The hard work is all this other stuff, the shift in the learning environment, as Una said. So that's what we're doing. So, I didn't touch upon that because it's all sort of part of the same conversation.
Would it be easy to insert a sentence? Or, as a result of these changes, we've also changed our grading system to
We'll
just,
work on
just,
that.
in
Yep.
terms of, here's what we're looking for, moving towards.
Sure.
Because I think it may, yeah, so.
Sure.
Other, would it be possible, if, so for example, I'm running the meeting and haven't looked at it, if I came by the Board of Education, the central office tomorrow to look at it for a few minutes?
Sure.
Or for others on the board to do so, okay.
It's a big document, thank you guys, I know
Oh,
it's a
you're welcome.
lot, and it's like
Yay, Glory.
so much, so incredible compared to what it used to be, like, yeah, so thank you, yeah.
First week of February.
So are there any other comments or questions or concerns about either the sample budget presentation, the budget talking points, or the draft that we're, do you want to, yeah, go ahead. Right. Come on, no, that's why we're here.
We usually do a postcard. We still gonna do that?
It's already at the printers and being
Okay.
sent out this week.
And, did we change the logo?
Yeah. It was part of our website package.
Last summer.
Yep, last year.
Last
Yep,
summer?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
Do you mention the new website? The website's great. I think the website's.
I can, I don't think, it seems so long ago in my mind, but it really wasn't that long ago. We certainly could.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yep.
That was
Just a
big-
small thing, and here's one of the many things we've been doing. Yeah.
Sure.
I assume there's discussion in there about the new website?
That's what I just. That's what I just said. I know, toggling
Sorry.
between many things. I'm continually impressed on how Sue can track like 5 different things at once. If there's no other comment, then we are now in the public comment section. So before speaking, please state your name, your town of residence, and address your remarks to the board chairperson, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. You all know me by now. My name's Jenna Santa Maria. I'm a resident of Regents. Just 2 quick points tonight. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the information surrounding the creation of the middle school task force and researching different models and coming together with the community to make a plan. I'm really excited about that. And I also want to say, I can't address you, sorry, but to Christina, I really like the ideas that you were talking about, like the walkthrough with community members and allowing parents and interested community members say and, the opportunity to be engaged. And I'm really excited about all of that. And then my final comment is that I really do appreciate the clarity and the openness by Tom to talk about the executive session last week and just providing the community with that information. And I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Anyone else?
Rose Wenzel from Virgent, and I just want to say with all the transitions that are going on, I work at the school district. I just want to thank Sheila. I mean, it's been a long process, and we as teachers and support staff have been waiting to find out what's going to happen, as has she, because I know she hasn't known either. But when she found out, she notified us as quickly as possible and contacted unions and brought us in to make sure everything was right. And it's just a good feeling to know that staff and administration are still working together, and we're going in the right direction, we all hope. And I think we are.
Other comments? Yeah, Chris.
With your permission, can I use the whiteboard real quick?
Sure. Can you identify yourself?
Chris Cahart.
You're not on camera, do you care?
I don't care. This is for you.
Well, he's
Okay,
getting
so
this.
we talked a lot about proficiency-based learning,
Oh.
and it's unmandated proficiency-based grading. It's 1 through 4 system, but not be confused with grade point averages of 1 through 4. Everyone's doing this a little bit different. We have a conversion scale that makes the 4 into 90s, 3 into 80s. And the problem is that a lot of different schools are doing it in different ways. U32 just went through a process where they changed all of their proficiency-based grades up half a point. So now their 3.0 translates into a 3.5 for a GPA, which in most scales equals a 95. Ours is straight 90. And so you see a lot of different things here. BurlingtonCars.com has a scholarship right now where you can submit a report card and win a car or a $1,000 scholarship. They have a process for determining how many A's or B's are on your report card. And you get a submission into this lottery, 2 submissions for every A, 1 submission for every B. So the same student that goes to school here versus the same student who goes to school at U32 or any other school that uses a 100-point scale, our students are going to be at a disadvantage because our 3 equals a B in their conversion because they have A's in the proficiency-based grading system at a 3.4. This is the biggie. This is where we are different than everyone else, and this is where U32 has seen the error of their ways and added half a point to all their grades. Big controversy over the Christmas break when they did that, but that gets them more in line with what a 3.0 in this proficiency-based grading system really is. And so we need to work towards rectifying our conversion scale so it's more in line with what scholarships are looking at, what colleges are looking at. We were at a college tour at RPI this past weekend. Big thing comes up on the display as the admissions officer is explaining everything, and he says, kids that get in here get A's and A minuses. Young girl in the front says, okay, but what's that on the percentage scale? And what she was talking about was the 100-point scale, right? And that admissions officer without missing a beat says, well, that would be 90 and above. I raised my hand and said, what would that be on the proficiency-based grading scale? He said, well, that's different. I don't know. We'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. So it's all concrete if you're talking about standard A's, B's, C's, or if you're talking about 100-point scale. It gets really muddy and murky when we start talking about a 1 through 4 scale that doesn't correspond to any kind of A, B's, and C's, or 100-point scale.
Okay.
Three minutes?
Your 3 minutes is up.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Waltham and Virgins, and a lot of us have felt we can't speak up right now about a lot of the issues going on because our school wasn't the one on the chopping block, as it were. We understand that that's really emotional for the Ferrisburg and Addison residents, but it does impact us too, and we have an obligation to speak up as well. I wish all the schools could stay open. I believe that the board's proposal, though, moving forward is where we are financially. I served on the Planning Commission in Virgins for 5 years, the Development Review Board for almost that amount of time. I've seen the census data. I don't think you guys have a choice, and I think you're doing what needs to be done. That being said, I think there's a wonderful opportunity here for us all to come together. I coach, I'm a scout leader, I'm a volunteer in the school, I do a lot in the community. I know and am privileged to know wonderful children in Ferrisburg and Addison, and I am so excited if we're all gonna get to come together a lot more. If Addison kids are in Virgins next year, they're gonna get a warm welcome. They're gonna be part of everything that we do right from day one, and I hope that it will be a wonderful transition for them. I think Alder said it well when he said that children are resilient, and we will help them be resilient. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for giving me 3 minutes.
Yes, sir.
My name is Douglas Sutton. I'm from
the town of Ferrisburg. I'd like to echo Alex's sentiments here and give my support to the process that you've gone through with looking at the petitions and the whole function of a board. Our society is built on governing bodies, whether it's your board, it's a Congress of the United States, or if it's a Senate up in Montpelier. These governing bodies are essential to drive the progress of our society. And what you do here, you do represent the people. So we do have a voice, and we use it through these types of bodies. So if change needs to come, we need to have communication with you so that we can mitigate that issue. I feel bad when I heard that there was trash talking on the chair's home phone. That has no place in the process. That's just a breakdown or lack of communication. So this time, I'll yield the rest of my time to the board. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. We are headed in the right direction.
Thank you. Yes.
I have to write mine down. Sorry. So my name is Kara Quinn, and I just wanted to speak up and share both how sad I am for the families of Addison and the fact that the school unification has resulted in the closure of their school, and also to hopefully inspire us all to try to shift our perspective a bit. I'm a 16-year veteran teacher. I work in Burlington and understand the significance of neighborhood and community schools and the powerful role they play in the lives of students and families that they serve. I also understand that schools and communities cannot continue to afford a per pupil spending increase that's not sustainable. And all over the state, we're experiencing this reality due to declining student population. But back in 2007, when my son Silas was born, and he later grew to become school age, that's when I started to question whether or not our family's needs would be met in this small rural agricultural community that we lived in. And as a teacher, I questioned the education my son was receiving and his access to like-minded peers. I started to believe that the solution to my problems might be to move. And then one day it hit me that your community is really however you choose to define it. It's easy to define your community as the children and families that your child is in school with, but for me that wasn't enough. I needed it to be bigger. So if you ask me where I live, I tell you Virgins. But if you ask me about my community, I'll tell you that it includes the students and families at VUMS in Virgins, the students and families at Silas's art school in Burlington, the students and families at his climbing school in Burlington, and the students and families at his taekwondo and music communities in Virgins and beyond. And that's just my son's community. That doesn't include my daughter's community, in which she participates in many different activities, or my husband and my community of friends, coworkers, and acquaintances. I tell you this not because I want you to admire how bountiful my community is. Instead, I want you to think about how this new opportunity for community unification presents a chance for you to be able to cast your own net wider. A chance for you to begin to consider the children that your daughter plays with on the basketball team, the children that your son marches with in the high school band, the children that your child dances beside at the opera house and plays with on the playground, all part of your community. And if it weren't for the sacrifices that communities like Addison are making today, we all wouldn't be able to benefit from the programs and services that are available to our larger community. By cutting the programs and services at the elementary level, we're creating the opportunity to continue to provide programs and services that can unite our larger community and strengthen our schools. So I'm asking you to cast your net wider tonight and shift your perspective slightly to define your community as the larger one. But in addition to casting your nets wider, I'm asking you to stop fighting each other. It's not the school board members' fault that we're in this situation. Instead, we should be thanking them for their dedication and commitment to our larger community. Instead of fighting, I wonder if we could work to create a new and fairer process that better meets our collective needs from the beginning. I wonder if we could stop reacting and start being proactive. Let's stop blaming the people and start fixing the process. I believe that we all want to be a part of the kind of community that creates and initiates that kind of positive, proactive change.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public tonight? Thank you very much for your comments. So I would now like to entertain a motion.
Okay. I move that we find it necessary to go into executive session on the issue of attorney-client communications about a petition submitted to the board because premature public knowledge of the legal advice would place the district at a substantial advantage.
Disadvantage.
Disadvantage. Sorry.
And invite the superintendent.
I would like to, well, we need to talk about that,
Oh, that's
right?
right, sorry, yeah.
We need to talk, we need to
Second.
well, second.
Second.
So seeing as how I don't know what the legal advice is, and it is from our attorney about which it's privileged and confidential, I believe that that is enough for us to be able to go into executive session to learn what has been said for us.
We can't talk about it, so we can't figure it out, so
We
we have to
don't-
go
we don't
into
know what it
executive
is.
session in order to hear what our attorney has to say.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it is.
And
Sorry, guys.
probably the only person that knows that right now is the superintendent.
Right.
So you've got to invite her.
I will in just a minute.
We haven't, we're still trying to make a
We're trying to do this
finding.
better.
Trying to do a finding. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns? So, all in favor of the motion that John just read, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Okay,
Thank
now-
you. So the motion passes.
Based on the finding, I move we go into executive session under attorney-client privilege, citing VSA 313A1F, inviting the superintendent to join us.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So let's go into.
We only understood what just happened, no.